And
whatever. Thanks, Restream, for not letting our video play. That's awesome.
We'll put it in post.
Welcome to.
Will we though?
We'll see. Welcome to Momentous Live, episode 20. AKA, we're winging it this week. All sorts of exciting things have happened. But this week, Bezos in space, fleets are fleeting, Bourdain from beyond, and more. Hello, friends. Graham, we missed you. Welcome back.
I'll rename myself here. Yeah, honestly, a great little trip. Did a whole thing out on the... there we go. See? Now
Ray Williams has returned.
Great little trip out to Vancouver Island. Went out to Jordan River. Down by Souk, which was nice. Went up to Ucluelet, where I ran into some friends that were camped one spot over from us. We had no idea they were going to be there. Yeah, and then we went over to Comox and then Horn Lake. Managed to get into the caves at Horn Lake. There's a provincial park there where you can go with a guide, and absolutely phenomenal. Very, very cool stuff.
You were doing some spelunking, I gather.
That's right. I've got a sticker that says I was spelunking at Horn Lake. So
one of the best words in the English language, spelunking.
And isn't there an old video game from the 80s called Spelunker as well?
I think so.
Oh, it sounds like Gray's neighborhood in the background there.
Yeah, I was looking to see if I could find my mute there.
I think it's just M on the keyboard.
It's good to be home.
Perfect. So let's get into it. We've got so much. For a slow news month, there's actually a lot of news, but it's like this whole grab bag of stuff. So we've been talking about space a lot in the last few weeks, including Richard Branson sticking it to Jeff Bezos last week by getting to space just before his billionaire counterpart. And Jeff Bezos this week launched into space on Blue Origin's first astronaut flight. And he brought his brother with him. And from takeoff to landing, I think it was like 10 minutes all in. But, he reached up and touched the face of God. And hopefully he got a message to bring back to the people. But so here we go. Another billionaire going to space. We described this as a little bit of a genital measuring contest. I mean, that's the cynical take on all this. I mean, there are some legitimate issues to discuss around the privatization of space and whatnot. But, just put yourself into Jeff Bezos' shoes for a minute as a former finance guy from the 90s, starts an e-commerce site that everyone was skeptical about before e-commerce was really even a thing. And, just slowly but surely losing money for decades. And then 25 years later, gets to go to space thanks to, the resources accrued from, Amazon.com and especially including AWS, Amazon Web Services. Mm-hmm. And he started Blue Origin, several years ago, along with, Elon Musk and SpaceX and whatnot. And now he says, Blue Control, Bezos, best day ever. So, again, we talked about Elon Musk as a 12-year-old, and I think Jeff Bezos in this case is enjoying his teenage self, is probably having his mind blown on this very day.
If Musk is a 12-year-old, I think we've talked about this before. Bezos is a Bond villain.
Go on.
Well, just going to space and the whole motif, the vibe, the look that he's fostering.
You're saying because he's bald.
That's probably
and he was petting a long-haired cat the entire time. Is that right?
Yes.
So the capsule carried Bezos, who's 57, his 53-year-old brother Mark. He also brought a couple of others along: 18-year-old Dutch physics student Oliver Damon, and 82-year-old aviation pioneer Wally Funk. And they went 107 kilometers above Earth, came down for a parachute-aided, dust-raising landing in the West Texas scrublands. And the rocket also returned safely, making a vertical-powered touchdown at its designated landing zone, sort of what SpaceX had been pioneering. So being able to land the rocket part sections and reuse them later, which is one of those key innovations to save money for future future takeoffs and missions. I think one of the key differences here between Bezos' adventure into the edge of space and Branson's is that Spaceship Two and the Unity ships, basically, it was a plane, like an airplane aided injection into the upper atmosphere, whereas Bezos, I think, arguably took the riskier move and went up on a rocket. And some of us might know that, like, astronaut is literally the most dangerous profession on Earth, or slightly above Earth. And I think going on a rocket adds that extra, is part of that danger impact. So, kudos to him for, doing it kind of like an actual astronaut would.
Mm-hmm.
Graham,
Yeah.
do you wish it was you? Are you slightly envious?
I'm not. I mean, envious, absolutely. Jealous,
Mhm.
no. I wouldn't want to deprive him of this. It's fascinating. 'Cause right now, I've literally just started watching For All Mankind. I watched the first episode when it first came out,
Mhm.
and let the whole thing sort of fall by the wayside. And Wally Funk, of course, being one of the Mercury 13, one of the women who were training for the astronaut program, who got sort of set aside, which the For All Mankind actually sort of pursues that storyline of what would have happened if they had have realized that women actually are phenomenal astronauts. They consume less oxygen than a lot of the guys do, and in most situations are actually more emotionally in control in tight spots. Bless Jim Lovell and the guys on Apollo 13, but
You can punch your way out of most problems, can't you?
yeah, that's the Marvel Cinematic way. So I mean, see, like this is tracking really with what I've been watching, the last couple of days. On the ferry ride back, I was watching some of these episodes, so it's sort of interesting to see her, make this flight with Mr. Bezos. I think I'd be a little less cynical about this. Had he paid any taxes last year? That's a big one for me. All of the work that went into the space program up until private industry started getting in there was all funded by, it was publicly funded through private industry, both through NASA and then through people like, Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin, all these sort of folks. And looking at this and seeing this right now, I'm so happy for him and everyone that's there. And I'm also happy to see that there is private industry taking an interest in space. But it's just really challenging to take a look at these folks and say, you've got so much money and you're not paying your way here. I think I'd just leave a better taste in my mouth if they were. And so I'm trying not to be cynical about this. I'm trying to be happy for them and happy that the human race is actually stretching out beyond our, shouldn't say even low Earth orbit. They touch the edge of space. This is the line that's being, parroted everywhere. They touched the edge of space. Didn't go to space. They touched the edge of space. Okay, cool. Call me when you're on the moon. But it's obviously like this is a huge, to paraphrase Neil, a huge leap for all of us. But it would sit better with me if these were people who were actually paying their way as well. And the one thing that we did see was Bezos, with a lot of his interviews, were very self-centered and egocentric. Like, I wonder how it's going to change me. Really, Jeff? You couldn't just friggin' look in the mirror and say, maybe I should actually start helping humanity as well. That didn't take me putting you up in a rocket for 10 minutes. I could have given you that in 30 seconds. So maybe it did change him. This was my hope, is that it would change both him, Branson, Musk. Take a look back down at that pale blue dot and say, I am one of all of you, as opposed to I'm above all of you. We'll see in the next little while. And there's a bunch of different things that are happening with Amazon right now. I believe in Alberta, one of their warehouses is looking at the option to unionize. And if they pull out of Alberta based on that, then we know that Jeff has not changed at all.
Well, the other thing is, I just heard this evening, I guess it was announced at some point today, I think he's heard some of the criticism and he donated something like 200 million to, I guess, social causes. Partly because I think some of that criticism that you're mentioning, Gray, was coming back, but and that's great. I don't want to downplay it, but it is kind of like you have to be called on before you're going to donate. And I definitely agree that space travel, I think we all agree that there's a lot that comes out of space travel. And he did donate 200 million, so that's great. But I guess, like you say, the proof is in the pudding. Well, let's see if it's actually changed him long term, and this isn't just PR and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say one thing: we do have to kill the negative stereotype of bald men being villains. They're not always villains. I will point you to the latest Superman show. You need to watch that.
Will do.
But yeah, I mean, looking at this, there's incredible technology here, right? And there's a race on between not just private industry and public groups, but between different countries as well. And there's a lot of good that can be done outside of our atmosphere. And so anything that pushes us forward, great. But this look, maybe for all of us and not just for one of us, I think would be good. Let's get more people up there. You know what? Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic shouldn't just be about space tourism. And I think Elon's kind of got the hook on this. Is it needs to be more about sure, you should have space tourism, but that space tourism should also fund space industry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we will save the discussion of carry forward loss harvesting and the other intricacies of the IRS tax code in order to not pay taxes for the most boring episode of Momentous Live coming soon to a live stream near you.
Ouch.
But moving on, we have a little bit more of follow-up. Last week, we talked about fulfilling one of my childhood fantasies of living in a Lego camper, it's not a Lego camper van, a Volkswagen camper van. And then Lego went and released a Lego version of said VW camper van. And now, this past week, Lego has announced they're releasing an official Seinfeld set. So Lego is just doubling down on the nostalgia. They're shameless. I mean, it's great for the collectors. How many people are actually going to just set this up and then shellac it and put it in a corner? And how many people are actually going to play with it or let their kids play with it? I mean, go see the Lego movie for a whole commentary on that debate there. Either of you Seinfeld fans? I watched Seinfeld a bit in the 90s, wasn't a religious follower, but it's still, I think if Tasia was here, she may be a little bit more excited about it. Will, you're Seinfeld adjacent at least, aren't you?
Yeah, the thing is, I have to admit, it's funny how much in my life, but I'm not really a huge fan, partly because I always found it so negative and that bad things always happen to the main characters. And I never really loved it. I liked it okay, but I was never like a huge fan. Having said that, I strangely, I think I've ended up seeing many episodes either through osmosis or being at other people's houses or what have you. This is also interesting because Lego has also released a set previously for Friends and for, what's the Bazinga show? I can never remember the name of it.
Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory. So they've released other sets like this for adult collectors, I guess. But yeah, I've never been a huge Seinfeld fan. One of the funniest things I think, having lived as long as I have, is that, Seinfeld was so massive 20, 30 years ago, and actually the younger generation, from what I hear from the younger kids,
these days,
don't like Seinfeld. Friends is the one that's winning out. So, how about you guys? So you said you were?
I'd gladly buy a Central Perk Lego set. So yeah, I'm there. I like this. I mean, here's my confession. I've never actually watched a full episode of Seinfeld. Not once. Not even the last episode. I tuned out before it was done. I was like, this doesn't feel like me. And here's the thing: is I've seen, and that's by osmotically, I know a ton of the jokes. I know a ton of the references from the show.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have to watch full episodes. You heard the funny bit, and then somebody explained to you why it's funny, or now you see clips on YouTube. It's like there's a lot of TV there, and what I've seen is good. Like I probably would actually enjoy this to go through. I've been told, because I don't really like cringe comedy, and so the bookend on that was, well, don't watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. I'm like, well, I wasn't going to. Thank you for the heads up on that. But the one thing that I do love, and bring us back to Superman. Well, this is a really quick loop here.
Wow.
Apparently there was a Superman hidden in every episode. I guess there was a statue on the shelf and whatnot. Yeah. And you can see here on the fridge, Superman is there. So well done. It's the folks who got that right. Stuff like this is cool. Like it doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you step on it, then it's absolutely
But this is also an interesting thing with Lego. We kind of briefly touched on this, is that there's a whole adult collectors market, and that actually sort of is symbiotic with the child, collector's market or child play market, because one sort of fuels the other. I mean, that's what allows them to do so much, is that they are not just dominant in one segment of the population, that they're kind of dominant in a few.
Can I ask you guys a question? So not Seinfeld, but if you had to pick a show that you were able to get a Lego set for, what show would that be?
Oh, I know.
I think I know too. You go first, Will.
Red Dwarf.
Nice. Ooh. Yes. Excellent choice. Okay.
I think the one that just popped to mind, because there's lots of cool space stuff as well, would either generation of Battlestar Galactica, either the original series or the Ronald D. Moore reboot.
I feel like almost like one big set that actually sort of blends the two together would be phenomenal. Right? I'm going with the Adventures of Briscoe County Jr.
Nice.
Science fiction cowboys, right? Like it's This led into my love of Firefly many years on. So
so the Seinfeld Lego set coming soon, August 1st, 2021, going for $79.99 US, and I believe so. It's a simpler set than the Lego Volkswagen van one we talked about last week, which I think was pushing $200, but that was that was in the 4-digit number of pieces, a couple thousand pieces there. One of the neat details about this Seinfeld Lego set is it's zoomed a little further back, so you actually see the lighting riggings and whatnot. There's some part of the TV production aspect included in there as well, which is kind of a neat touch for especially anyone who's ever worked in broadcast. It's like, why not? Might as well have that stuff in there too.
Nice.
In other miscellaneous entertainment news, unopened Super Mario game from 1996 sells for $1.56 million. Now, to be clear, this is not an NFT. This is an actual physical object in the real world, graded at 9.8 out of 10. So that is pretty much as minty as mint can get. And it was auctioned off in Dallas by Heritage Auctions. It broke its previous record price for the sale of a single video game. Now, I remember when Super Mario 64 was, their sneak peek was offered at Playland at the Pacific National Exhibition here in Vancouver. And I think it was the summer of 1997. I think we went there on my birthday and I had gastroenteritis. So I was clenching my cheeks hard that entire day. Great for going and popping Imodiums too. But I think part of that same experience is they had a tent somewhere where they had a bunch of Nintendo 64s hooked up, and I think it was the Japanese version of Super Mario 64 that you could take for a little test drive, which is pretty cool. Now, I think y'all are both a Nintendo generation, but Will, I think you're. One thing I'll always remember about you, Will, as working together at one of our past companies, is your ringtone, your former ringtone on your phone. And how did that ringtone go?
It's me, Mario. Was it that one?
No, there's another one. It was the starting song when the game when Super Mario, one of the versions would start. What's that little few notes? Yeah. Over and over again in the office.
I drove Wes, friend of the show, absolutely bonkers with singing Super Mario. But yes, I also had it's me, Mario on my phone for a while.
That sounds like it was probably your text message.
Yeah.
So either of you have Nintendo consoles of any generation, and do you have any shrink-wrapped copies in mint condition of any of the Mario games?
So here's the crazy thing. I actually, going back to the Nintendo DS and the 3DS, I've got a ton of games that are still in the shrink-wrap. I was part of a Nintendo review program, and they would usually send me multiple copies of each game. And so I've got some Kirby games that are still shrink wrapped. Now these are only going back 10-ish years, but I imagine they'll be worth at least tens of dollars in the decades to come.
Oh, possibly dozens of dollars.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, just and as you said, I think most of us here are Nintendo fans. One of the things about this game in particular, I mean, there's two things that stand out about the story. First of all, Mario 64 is revolutionary. It's one of those ones that's not just any game. It's not, some WWE 1998 or something. This was a revolutionary game. It was the first 3D Mario, and it was really pushing the edge of this 3D animation in games and this immersive world. I remember just being blown away by it. Up until very recently, I used to have nightmares about drowning and the sort of sea snake chasing me, and like literally for 20 years had this dream about worrying about the air capability and little thing ticking down. This is how impactful it was for me at the time. The other thing to me on this story is that it shows that this new generation, as we talked about like a few months back with, investing in GameStop or investing in things like NFTs or investing in things like Gray is hugely knowledgeable in cryptocurrency, that our generation or the generation younger than us is and the Pokemon cards we talked about a while ago as well, that they're choosing to invest their money in other things. And these things are actually worth money and people didn't expect it. And people would not, and that's where the true value comes from. Who would have thought not to open a version of Nintendo 64 Mario? Like, people were opening them. So there's probably not that many that are unopened in a 9.8 condition, right?
It's interesting to think, because like there was, going back to like the death of Superman. We're here again. This is
a Superman episode.
Do you remember the
strike 3, Gray?
do you remember the reign of the Superman, the comic? So the death of Superman Doomsday, when that came out, they had the black polybagged issue. And and everyone was like, you gotta buy it because it's gonna be worth something someday, because everybody bought it. I don't know that it necessarily is. I know I've got one sealed at home. I bought one that I opened, and I bought one that is still sealed. I do have John Byrne's Man of Steel that's in decent condition in a bag with a board and whatnot. But that's in my father had this steamer trunk they brought over from England when he came over. All of his vinyls in there, and that's got my baseball cards, my hockey cards. I haven't looked at these things in 30 years. Yeah. They could very well be, but we were in a collector's mindset there, just not for video games, I don't think.
The other thing that, and you're totally right, and the other thing that's interesting is the things that hold a lot of value, having been a sort of a collector of hockey cards and other trinkets like that for many years, is the things that are the most valuable, like Superman Action Comics #1, is no one expected it was going to be a collector item. Yeah. So no one kept it in good condition. So the ones that are around are super valuable. Also, that baseball card, I forget who it was, but it's the world's most valuable baseball card, because it was given away with cigarettes, and he didn't want his image in with cigarettes. So there weren't very many of them made, because he refused to have his picture put in with cigarettes because kids were buying these.
Right.
So
and he was in an upside down biplane as well. Holding a car over his head. Is that?
Yeah. So that's where like the things that end up being valuable are not the things that you expect, right? So that's also another thing I'd say about this Nintendo game, is that people are going to start digging out old copies of, I don't know, Battletoads or something. It's like, it's not going to be worth much money, I hate to tell you.
Well, this kind of comes down to some of the rarity thing. Like, this one's sealed, but it used to be that you wanted to buy a rare video game because you couldn't get it anymore. Mm-hmm. I remember I bought a copy of Bionic Commando for $30 when it was years old, because you couldn't find it anywhere. I played it once at a flea market in Florida, and I've forgotten what this game was. When I found it again, I'm like, yeah, I've got to have this.
There's a huge resale value for Atari Jaguar and what's the other one? Sega Saturn, but particularly Jaguars, the system and the games on it can be crazy expensive, like several $100s. And people were even designing new games for the Saturn because people wanted to play games on the Sega Saturn. So
yeah, but looking at Super Mario 64, like, that's playable on literally almost every Nintendo console since, type of deal. It came out on the 3DS, and it's out again on the Switch, and it was on the Wii and the Wii U. Like this, they're just, it's finding its way to all of it. It wasn't on the Wii and the Wii U. Sorry,
well, it's on the marketplace, isn't it?
Yeah,
now? Yeah.
But it's like all of these games basically found their way into the newer consoles. I've got a GameCube disc, I think, that had a Link to the Past on it, as well as Four Swords, which was the one where you had to link up all the Game Boys. But Nintendo's been making good money bringing these things across, so it's not so much that it was the rarity of the actual IP, but the fact that this thing has some status of being sealed. I'm curious to know, like, 'cause we've become more of a collector mindset now. So are we going to see other video games that are like this in the future, unless there's something unique about it, something, maybe an error in the box art, something like that? I don't think we'll see much like this again. This one feels unique to me.
And, you know, the vinyl world can educate us a little bit on this, because some collectors care about the rare Japanese pressing of Paul's Boutique with the yellow label instead of the blue label. But how many people actually care about that? Like you say, you can get a copy of Paul's Boutique. You don't need the Japanese reissue of it. Whereas there are things that are actually out of print that they didn't actually bring and make MP3s of, that the only versions we have are vinyl. And there's a different kind of value associated with those, right?
Speaking of a link to the past, another wrinkle to this story is that the previous record holder for a single video game in an auction for sale was Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda, which sold just prior to this for $870,000. And prior to that, there was another copy. There was a copy of Super Mario Brothers from 1986 that had been forgotten about in a desk drawer, and that sold for $660,000. So it's stories like this. People go, I wonder if I got a decent quality copy of this in my file somewhere. If only when we were the age that we were buying these sorts of things, that we had enough disposable income to be buying 2 or 3 copies, like one to play and enjoy. Because that's the thing. It's like, you buy comics to read and enjoy. You play video games to tear them open and stick them in your console and enjoy them. But most of us back in the 80s, or even into the 90s, people started to wake up to this as you start to see the boom, the resurgence of collector cards, like sports cards, baseball cards, hockey cards, and so on. That there was an aftermarket really started developing. But video games, it wasn't really old enough yet. I was finding all sorts of games at like Value Villages and Salvation Armies and whatnot. Of course, most of them weren't sealed and they were pretty banged up. But if only in those prime years of our lives, we had more disposable income from mowing lawns and babysitting and collecting cans and bottles at the side of the road to buy a couple of copies of each of those games and or comics or what have you, and tucked one away for to retire on later on.
Oh man. This my copy of Super Mario Brothers 3 with Canadian Tire money, so I really was already in the negative. So
yeah,
amazing,
funny money.
Well, I wonder how much of these sorts of purchases are being made by people who were early crypto investors, and so have like just mountains of Bitcoin or coin or Ether or Safe Moon, and that they're just putting their money into things like this because they got to do something with it, and might as well put it into something that they maybe they enjoyed from their childhood. The person that sold this one for $1.56 million, that's enough money that they could buy 725 Tag Heuer Super Mario limited edition smartwatches, which were selling for $2,150 each. They sold out very quickly, but look at this thing.
It's cool.
Mario in a round watch face, coming out of a pipe, all sorts of doing all sorts of things, like doing some pole dancing or whatever he's got going on there too. A playful design for an iconic and active character. So again, our childhoods are being mined for all sorts of disposable, for our current disposable income, because there are people that whether it's from crypto or otherwise, they're at the point where it's like, oh yeah, I could finally have a smartwatch with Mario on it instead of
mine away.
So, Will, would you spend $2,150 US to have Mario on your wrist with you?
Probably not, but I think it's pretty awesome. I mean, unfortunately, I've got too many other expensive things to buy, and responsibilities. Adulting is tough. But yeah, no, I think this is awesome. If I had the money, I would.
Gray, who would you like to see on a smartwatch? What would tip you over the edge and put? I know you're not the biggest Mario guy, despite your.
I'm pretty close on this one. Not gonna lie to you, this is pretty great.
All right, so then who would be your number 2 if not Mario? What Nintendo character from the past? I think I have one.
I'm a Legend of Zelda guy. So for me, it would actually be Link, but Link from Wind Waker, the animated game that originally came out on the GameCube, and then how it's been released since. on a bunch of other platforms. That one, the animation style was always really charming to me.
Yeah.
It's just it felt like playing a cartoon, and was just felt hopeful and fun. And I mean, it's a post-apocalyptic world where most of Hyrule is underneath the water. But that kind of tracks with where we're going anyway. So just
Stuff happens.
It felt like Future Home. It's great.
But he's got a boat, doesn't he?
He does. He does. The King of Red Lions. Yeah. Who turns out to be, spoilers, won't say anything. But turns out to be an influential character.
And we should all have boats at this point. If I had to choose a character to put on the front of my smartwatch, or to have a special limited edition Tag Heuer smartwatch, it might be one of the fireballs from the original Donkey Kong.
Okay. Niche, but I like
it.
Cute.
They're kind of cute. They had the little eyes, and they bounced around, and they were deadly, and you couldn't jump over them. So, and it's appropriate for this time of year in British Columbia. So,
too soon.
In other gaming news, I thought Gray might take notice of this. Valve's Steam Deck is a portable PC and will launch December 2021 for $399 US. The announcement came just mere hours before the Nintendo Switch OLED pre-orders were set to begin. Steam Deck is a portable PC platform that features a 7-inch touchscreen, 2 thumbsticks with a D-pad, and a 4-button control layout. The Steam Deck will play games from the user's Steam account using only the device itself, with no streaming needed. A charging dock that can connect to external displays via HDMI or USB-C will be sold separately from the device, and you can also use other powered USB hubs if you have them already. Now, Gray, I know that you've experimented with a few alternative gaming platforms over the years, and Steam obviously is grown by leaps and bounds over the years, thanks to Valve's efforts and its ability, to play so many games from so many developers on there. And would you be interested in having this library of Steam titles available in a handheld format like this?
I would. It's kind of interesting. I'm going to take this to Will first, though, because I've got some noise in the background. So,
alrighty.
Yeah, no worries. I think this is very intriguing. It's definitely interesting timing in the sense of when it came out. I think it's a pretty nice little system. It's pretty powerful. Now, having said that, it is pricey, but I'm definitely interested.
Yeah, there's 3 models available. A 64 gig model for $399. Again, these are all US dollars. A 256 gig model for $529, and a 512 gig model for $649. All of them will come with carrying case, while the more expensive model includes perks like exclusive Steam community profile bundles, and for the 512, anti-glare etched glass, which is probably a good idea if someone was taking this on the go. Mobile devices, as we know, tend to get banged up a little bit. Pre-orders went live last Friday, July 16th. I'm not sure how the numbers are, if Valve has publicized numbers yet, but they aim to ship this in December 2021. They're cutting it mighty fine there if the idea is to surprise someone for Christmas, because as we know, doing hardware is hard. No specific date in December has been provided at this time, so it could be December 31st for the first shipment, for all we know. Scott, go ahead.
Valve's famous for what they call Valve time, which is going to be delayed and delayed and delayed. I'm interested here, but looking at the price points and looking at the performance, 64 gigabytes of space gets you maybe one game, maybe. Like from what I understand, Destiny, the last time I checked, was over 80 gigabytes on the install. This does not cut it by any means.
There are other games aside from Destiny, right, Gray?
Yeah, but they're not really worth playing. I'm just kind of looking at it going, okay, you've got a lot going on here. Obviously, it's really going to come down to, do games play well on this thing? It's an 800 lines of resolution as far as the resolution goes, which versus the 720p on the Switch, which at this size is not going to be noticeable. I don't want to say I'm sour on Valve for hardware, but when I take a look at all of the stuff that they brought out, I've got a Steam Link that has been deprecated. I've got a Steam controller, which never really kind of landed for me. They were promising that it was going to be the revolutionary thing, never really did. Their entries into VR have been phenomenal in getting people into VR and then kind of thrusting them over at Oculus and Facebook, because they've not really advanced the hardware. And which is really unfortunate, because now people are getting locked into Facebook accounts with their VR. So I'm looking at this going,
Plus,
I don't know that I need you.
Plus, where's Half-Life 3?
Yeah, well,
Talking about Valve time.
Yeah.
I would say the other thing that's kind of interesting, and Gray, I'm sure you'll have something to say on this, is I think we talked a few weeks ago about, handhelds and Nintendo's dominance when we were talking about the Switch, and how much there is an adult market is also an interest to me, and how much people want to play games, like Destiny and other games where they have full rigs, and whether the experience will be satisfying, to your point, Gray, and whether handhelds are partly the realm of Nintendo and lighter entertainment than these heavy AAA. Well, they're not all AAA, I know, on Steam, but some of these that they were showing in that little clip are big games, right?
As mentioned in a previous episode, I'm still holding out hope for a successor to the PS Vita, because I'm still rocking my PSP 1001 for basically one or two games that I play on it. Now, Gray, to address the storage issues that you mentioned, the 64 gig is definitely pretty anemic. There's the 256 and 512 gig models as well. So, but there's also an SD card slot. A, do you think the SD card slot would be fast enough? And B, if you had to choose one of the other two, what do you think the sweet spot is for the storage? Or would you just go like all out?
I mean, honestly, for the price, like you're looking at the 256 is not bad, but for $129, you can probably drop a terabyte SD card in there. I mean, it's not NVMe, so I'd probably say the 256. For your high priority games, and maybe this is one of the fun things that I used to do with my Steam library back when SSDs were first a thing. Is there was a little application that would just shuttle your titles around. Like, I want to play this now, so it would take everything else and load it onto your hard drive, and it would just load that onto your SSD. So, assuming that they've got some sort of functionality there where you can make sure that it's running on the fastest memory. I would imagine NVMe is probably going to be faster than any SD card you can put in there. Don't quote me on that. I haven't looked at that in a while. I could be wrong there. But I mean, $529 US. That's a hefty chunk of change. And when I'm looking at it and like, well, no streaming required. Do I actually care? Like when I'm now on, I've got my vaccine, so I got the 5G, and I'm running off my iPad off my Steam system at home, or streaming from my PlayStation.
What about when you're camping?
I still had signal. It was the worst thing. But I took some time to unplug while I was camping, and it's like, what I did try to do? I did try to hook up a projector to my iPad to see if we could all watch the last episode of Loki. And unfortunately, it was one of these old bulb power projectors. So I've got a 300 watt solar generator with a panel, and it killed that thing right away. I did find though that we've got a projector upstairs that only draws 50 watts. I've got some streaming going for next time. It's gonna be good.
There you go.
So it would be safe to assume that the Steam Deck is probably not enough to dislodge the Nintendo Switch.
Honestly, like here's the thing: the PC gamers are like vehement about their systems, but I think they're vehement about their desktop systems. Mm-hmm. These are machines that they craft to get high-end performance and play these games with precision control that comes with a keyboard and mouse. Everything about this is the opposite, I think, of what a lot of the PC folks are about. Like, mm-hmm. I can take it and go outside, and I think a lot of folks are saying outside.
Yeah.
So exactly. Unless this becomes a bathroom gaming system, I just don't know who it's aimed at. Like, were they just kind of looking? And this is kind of where I wonder if has Valve kind of lost their way? Are they just looking at, Nintendo's making a ton of money, so let's go and get a piece of that pie? And it's like, guys, you've left so much money on the table here from the things that you've neglected over the course of the last 5 years that this is not winning me over. Sorry.
Speaking of other mobile computing news, Microsoft announces Windows 365, bringing cloud-based Windows to Mac and iPad, including all your apps, data, and settings to your personal or corporate devices. So new personal computing category specifically for the hybrid world known as Cloud PC. If you click through on the title of this article, it takes us right to the Microsoft announcement page, which has a little bit more in the way of imagery there. Now, what I want to know, and Graham, what you think on this is this Microsoft getting around the Windows on ARM, challenge?
Absolutely, yeah. 100%. Like this honestly, this is great. I feel bad for Parallels. These guys have been putting so much effort in, for years to basically run Windows natively on a Mac, and in a way where you don't have to boot camp into it. That was the dual boot solution for Mac, for Windows on a Mac. And I look at this, and this is interesting, because is this Microsoft ceding the hardware war to Apple? It just kind of like, in the past, it's been all about supporting, the manufacturers of Windows PCs. And now we're looking at this, and this is Windows is a cloud app. That to me is great. Like, there aren't many apps, I think, that I look at on Windows that I need to run the Windows version anymore. I think developers have really stepped up, and they've created Mac versions of a lot of the key apps on Windows that I used to, that's what I needed, parallels for. I don't need it anymore. And if I can run this off a cloud-based connection, this is actually reducing my dependency on Windows even more. So I'm kind of looking at this and just going, it's a really interesting solution. Like, do they feel like they're going to win over more people who've switched to the Mac and bring them back to a PC? And ultimately, it's about the hardware and the software together. So I'm fascinated by it. I like it. I just am looking at Microsoft and going, that was your choice. Okay.
Well, when Satya Nadella took over the reins as CEO of Microsoft about a decade ago now, he really made a point of repositioning Windows and making Microsoft a cloud-first company. Previously, it was Windows everywhere, and now it's basically, without maybe saying it such, as it's Microsoft Azure everywhere, which powers all their cloud products, including Microsoft 365. Now we have Windows 365. So Microsoft had basically, you mentioned ceding the hardware market to Apple, but they almost ceded the OS market to the cloud, preferably the cloud that much of their own systems would be powering, along with AWS from Amazon as well. But I wonder, however, if this, by making the OS even less relevant, is this more of a threat to Windows desktops or Mac desktops ultimately? Because so many of these apps, as you mentioned, are platform agnostic. Even on the Mac, so many of the apps that we get that we might not have had before are basically crappy Electron apps, which are just web apps wrapped in a sort of a cross-platform package, and breaks so many traditional Mac UI conventions. In the long term, who do you think this is going to help more and hurt more?
Well, when we looked at, when Apple looked at possibly streaming apps to individual devices, iOS devices, Mac devices, I think the general consensus, and Tim Cook came back and said, we're putting powerful hardware in the hands of the people so that they have what they need to do what it is where they're doing it. And the idea of all of that work that they've gone into putting into the A series processors, now the M series processors, and basically seeding that to cloud-based stuff. I'm trying to picture a world where the latency is low enough for this to be real world use. And this is the thing. I think there was probably a point where we would have accepted it, but we're now getting to a point where on-device AI recognition, voice recognition, Siri was, you'd record the voice chunk and send it up to the data, up to the cloud. It does the processing there and now sends it back to you. iOS 15, iPadOS 15, it's starting to do that back on the device, and it's smarter and faster than it's ever been. I think the time period there where cloud-based computing could have kind of etched its way in to the Mac faithful, I think it's past. I'm looking at this right now and saying, is Microsoft going to become a little bit like IBM, where they're the plumbing? Maybe, but I'm not looking at this and seeing anything other than apps that I would run if I haven't had the chance to install the native version yet. Because when I think of all of the things that Microsoft does that interact with my life, they're not things that require the type of power that like Big Iron in the cloud would do. So I'm looking at it going, again, I'm not seeing the reason here, the compelling reason here that this would be a killer app. I think it's a great feature. And, will I look forward to being able to log into Windows, in a window on my Mac? Maybe. But for as long as we have native apps, I'm not switching to cloud-based computing for that type of thing.
So the the requirements for game streaming are ostensibly a lot more demanding. So maybe for running Excel and Word, which we already have web versions. I mean, they're not great, but I wonder how an entire installation of Windows will stream it, because most people aren't necessarily going to use this for gaming. A lot of it's going to be productivity stuff, and anything outside of the traditional Microsoft apps, which you can already get through Microsoft 365. So this might be a way that is acceptable, rather than having to install something like Parallels or VMware Fusion on Macs, which, and currently not even working on M1 Macs going forward. And who knows if a native version will actually happen and would support Windows, for on ARM. So maybe this is the way forward, as long as it performs okay. And I guess the proof is remains to be the proof will be in the pudding. Remains to be seen. This is available starting in August for, I believe, Microsoft 365 subscribers. Windows 365 will be available on August 2nd to organizations of all size. No talk of the pricing here. It would probably be an add-on to Microsoft 365, I imagine. But for our organization, where we have both Windows PCs and Mac users as well, but there are one or two apps that we use that are Windows only, this could be an alternative. If the performance is there, to use those specialty Windows apps on Macs. So we're going to be paying close attention to this from our organizational point of view. However, if you want to do something a little more retro, and Will, you're a longtime iPad user and just, I believe, got yourself a nice little iPad Pro to keep up with the Williamses.
Yeah.
Well, now, did you know you can install Windows 3.1 on your iPad, and you can finally play Minesweeper and Solitaire and all your other favorite Windows 3.1 apps using IDOS. And there's this whole, convoluted way to get it going on there. Just go through all the steps. What do you think, Will? I mean, because you were a Windows user before you were a Mac user. Did you go back to the Windows 3.1 days?
This was pretty much the first. I mean, in my family, we had a lot of old computers, which Tristan, you might know. We had like an Osborne and a few other things. I couldn't touch them until I was a certain age. And one of the first things I was able to use was a computer using Windows 3.1. So I do have some nostalgia. I don't know why, but just because one of the first sort of interfaces I sort of had free reign and access to was a computer with Windows 3.1 on it. So for me, it's a bit nostalgic. Having said that, it belongs in the past. It's not exactly something I would use. It's fun to take a look at. I'd also rather not brick my brand new iPad in the process of trying to install it. So it's sort of like, why would you put a go-kart engine in a Ferrari? I'm not sure why I would do this. It's cool to see, and it's cool that people have done it. I know people when iPhones first came out were doing crazy things like this, trying to put like Windows 3.1 on an iPhone and things like that, or playing Mario Brothers, like old school Mario Brothers on the iPhones. They were jailbreaking and hacking them and stuff like that. So it's cool. I just wouldn't do it myself.
There's no jailbreaking here, though. This is literally just
an app.
An app in the iPad App Store, and then you can literally go through and run Windows, run the install.
Yeah, you just have to find, you of course you have to own Windows 3.1, a legitimate copy, a licensed copy. And well, of course, Will, as a law-abiding citizen of the internet, and with the IDOS app, you just figure out a way. And there's, again, the instructions in the article that we'll link in the show notes. So take you step by step. And, it's a number of steps, but it's not hard. It's just, it might be worth, if I'm, I'm a little tempted to, because I never had a Windows. Well, and I've got an old iPad, so, not much to risk there. Now, I never had a Windows 3.1 PC. I think the last PC I had was running DOS. It was Windows AT compatible. It's a Tandy TL1000, I believe.
I was about to say, does anyone have an unopened version of Windows 3.1 with the floppy disks?
and graded 9.8, and what's that worth on the
tens of dollars.
Tens of dollars.
But my mom had a Windows 3.1 PC, and I remember, like in the early 90s, I remember playing Doom on it, and of course Minesweeper and Solitaire and whatnot. And I also remember thinking how unintuitive Windows 3.1 was compared to what the state of the Mac was at that point, because we were already at system 7.5 around that time, I believe. And it's just like, the buttons on these windows make no sense to me. But anyhow, they, of course, Windows 95 a few years later changed everything. But anyway, so yeah, maybe I'll put a pin in this one and report back to you guys.
Yeah.
So back to native operating systems. Even though Apple announced iOS 15 at WWDC in June, they have continued to iterate on iOS 14. It was just a couple months ago, we had 14.5 that Tasia did a video on, and then 14.6, I believe, was last month. Now we've got 14.7, which features MagSafe battery pack support. So that's another little thing that we haven't talked about. We can do a quick tangent on that. And ability to combine Apple Card accounts and much, much more. Now, Graham, you're generally an early adopter. You're not doing so much the beta testing anymore in the iOSs, but have you got 14.7 on any of your iOS devices yet?
14.7 on the iPhone. I've actually iOS 15 beta 3 on the iPad. I did it. It's like a lot of these features they're great. Multiple timers on the HomePod, fantastic. Air quality, again, being in British Columbia in July and August, fantastic. I've already actually put it to good use, so that's good. The interesting thing about this, obviously, is that for me is the MagSafe battery pack. Have you guys taken a look at this little device?
Yeah, and it's amazing because it's a classic Apple solution for people that, I don't know if you want to find it and bring it up on the screen there, but MagSafe battery pack, which was released last week, is a classic Apple solution for people who wander into Apple stores, the ones that are open. It's like, I need to extend the battery life on my iPhone from the last couple of years. I guess it was only the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max and the 12 Mini all support MagSafe for charging. So you can pop this little guy on here, and in classic Apple fashion, it's underpowered and overpriced for it, but it's elegant and it integrates nicely, just as their battery cases did, with the whole charging subsystem and whatnot, and the UI that comes up to let you know what's going on, as opposed to a lot of the far more powerful and sometimes more affordable third-party solutions, but don't have that slick Apple integration. Are you tempted by this? Are you on 11 or 12, Grant?
I'm on 11 Pro.
Okay.
So I will, when the 13 Pro comes, it sounds like this is going to be an accessory that's going to live on through the next generation of iPhones. Because previously, if you had a battery case, it had to fit the phone, whereas the battery pack just slaps onto the MagSafe. The one thing that I do like, I was in the Apple store the other day picking up my MacBook from being repaired. Thank you, Apple, for the out of warranty repair that you covered there. But one of the guys that was there showed me, because I had my AirPods with my AirPods Pro and they were running out of battery. He's like, "Oh, here," and he pulls out this MagSafe battery pack and slaps my AirPods on them, and they start to charge. It was great.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's basically Qi charging. Boom, popped it there. So it sat there. I got a full charge while I was getting all my stuff processed through. And that to me is a great little use of technology. I really liked it.
Well, Will, what generation iPhone are you on at the moment?
I think a 10.
A 10R maybe? I think yours is a bit newer than mine. I think you're on a 10R.
I'm a couple of generations back. We're probably going to buy phones this fall or Christmas or whatever. So.
Yeah, well, Gray and I got our 10s around the same time, and then he upgraded 3 years in. We've been on the 4-year upgrade cycle. I'm still bitter that when they went from the 10 to the 10S, that Apple did not make a compatible battery case for the 10. It's like, and I've since gone and I've replaced my battery because it was not up to spec anymore. But I don't know, man. It's like they're so close. They just made one little change to, I think, the positioning of the camera bump or something, but it was not officially supported. And, maybe you could have crammed it in, and I don't know. But anyway, iOS 14.7, probably this far along in iOS. We're almost a full year into iOS 14 now. Probably pretty safe for people to go ahead and update there, because it's general housekeeping update, and probably one of the last major updates until we get into iOS 15 coming out in the fall. In social media news, it's too bad that Tasia's not here for us because, being a Twitter insider, Twitter is shutting down Fleets, its expiring tweets feature. Turns out they were a little bit fleeting after all. So this was Twitter's response to stories. And again, these social media companies, they feel compelled to do all the things. Oh, it's like Snapchat does a thing, so Instagram's got a copy, and Facebook does it as well, naturally. Now, if Twitter decides a couple of years later it does Fleets, and it's like, people, it's like, stop trying to make Fleets a thing. It's not going to happen.
Drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I hate,
honestly,
I've said it before.
Can we say, like, props to these guys, though? Recognized wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
So this hasn't been that long. And I love this. We're moving Fleets on August 3rd, working on some new stuff. We're sorry or you're welcome.
Yeah.
Remarkably self-aware. Great.
Self-aware. And I think this is a sign of the new Twitter after several years of not seeming to do a lot. And Jack Dorsey obviously having his attention split between Twitter and Square, and arguably a lot more of innovation had been happening at Square over the last few years. They've kind of seemed to have doubled down on the product development at Twitter. So they're moving fast and breaking things, as Facebook used to say. But they're trying lots of stuff, adding new features. Still no edit button. I don't know if we're ever going to get that. But this is another example of an experiment. It didn't take, and I trust they're making data-based decisions here. But this only came out last November, so we're only 8 or 9 months into it, and like, oh nope. So that's a good sign that they're. I mean, it's almost googly in a sense. I mean, Google is notorious for killing things, but often it's beloved things or things they can't figure out how to monetize. So anyway, pour one out for Twitter Fleets, their equivalent of stories, but the only difference being no one actually used them. Changing gears a little bit, did you guys check this out? There was an Anthony Bourdain documentary out that has a number of segments, but only one that's probably been publicly disclosed, whereby there is some voiceover courtesy of Anthony Bourdain, but the voiceover is actually AI generated based on hours and hours and hours of his voice that's out there from all his TV work in the past and interviews and so on. And they managed to generate an amazingly realistic rendition of his voice. And there was some controversy about the ethics of this because, well, these aren't words that he actually ever said, but they were words from an email that he had sent to a contact of his. And the filmmaker really wanted to have some voiceover for this segment. So they had this, they went to an AI company and had this generated. And the filmmaker claimed, oh no, it's all good. We got permission from the estate, and Anthony would have been fine with it, et cetera, et cetera. And then later on, I believe his late wife came out and said he definitely would not have been fine with this. So it's hard to read the minds of the dead, save for actually conducting a seance or something like this. But Will, how do you feel about something like this? I mean, this is his actual words, they were written by him, but never actually said by him. Do you think it's okay to have a pretty realistic rendition of the dead speaking their own written words for the purposes of conveying to an audience of a documentary?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little creepy, but I'm a big doc fan, and there's a lot of things that they do in documentaries to try to push the storytelling further, right? So, I mean, I don't have a huge problem with this personally, not that anyone's asking me, as long as it was clear. Yeah, well, you are. I think the important thing here is to maybe let people know that this is a storytelling device and not necessarily an actual document of the person. That would be the only thing for me. I do sometimes get a little bit annoyed when documentaries fudge things. And I know that there are also entertainment at the same time, but there is this illusion of them being an actual document, hence documentary. So I think there's a bit of that, but we also, get things like, it's really popular right now to put cartoons. People will talk and explain a story and they'll animate it to add more visual interest, in as part of the doc. So, I mean, there's a lot of storytelling devices that they're bringing into documentaries. So it's not just, the old, as much as I love Ken Burns, he's one of my favorite, filmmakers. But, we're moving past the push in and tilt and scroll across the screen. So, I mean, I think it's another technique. I see where people are blowing this up to do a bigger thing, but I don't think they set out to be evil. They just wanted to enhance the storytelling. So that's just my take on it. I know that this is one where people are really on either side of the fence, but
Graham, when they ultimately end up doing a documentary about your life, would you be okay with some robo voice recounting some of your previous emails or text messages?
Yes. I mean, the interesting thing here is that we have Anthony Bourdain's voice and Anthony Bourdain's words, but not necessarily Anthony Bourdain's intent. And so that to me, we talked a little bit in the past on one of the previous episodes about almost like a visual way of depicting tone. And that to me actually would probably make things a little bit better if someone was to take something that I had written, if there was some way of being able to attach how I would have delivered this. I think that would probably be something that I'd be more interested in. Failing that, I think you have to have a big old warning on the screen that just says, AI reproduction of, and you put a warning label on it. Great, we can hear that because we trust faces, we trust voices. Yeah. Deep fakes are challenging our trust of faces, and AI reproductions now can challenge our trust of voices. We can't believe what we see. We can't believe what we hear. So looking at that, unless there is something that says that, this is authentic or this is a reproduction, that to me, I think that's where this issue becomes wedged.
Because ultimately people will just assume that, oh yeah, that's him saying his actual words. So sort of like how you see in some shows or some documentaries or news stories where, say, dramatic reenactment or recreation or something like that. Now, you don't think that will take people out of the moment and go, oh, wait a second, this is like a robot AI version of his voice. Like, should they not maybe save it for the credits?
This is not a piece of fiction though, right? Mm-hmm. You're not in the moment. Mm-hmm. Now here's the thing. I'm watching For All Mankind. I'm hearing Richard Nixon talk to Teddy Kennedy, which did not happen. And so we're well aware that this is fiction. And the fact that they've masterfully woven through pieces of actual video content and actual recordings and change them just ever so slightly so that they feel like they fit. We know it's fiction, right? Whereas with a documentary, I go in believing, hopefully, that what we're seeing is as close to the truth as possible. And so I'm not in a moment there, right? It's like, again, seeing, something mocked up visually. If something's mocked up, auditorily, just tell me. I'll feel better that way. You will too.
Pardon me. So it wouldn't be an episode of Momentous Live if we didn't have yet another mention of one of Elon Musk's enterprises. And Tesla, there was a Tesla Model X that got trapped in the center of a tornado, which is interesting in itself. But because Sentry Mode was activated, it recorded what it was like to be in the eye of the storm. And this was a tornado that hit Barrie, Ontario. And a Reddit user posted the video where viewers could see how his car got caught in the center of this storm. It's it's not a huge story, but it's definitely interesting to check out. And the story that we linked in the show notes, there's a link within that story to the Reddit post and all the discussion about that. But it is, it's just a fun little tidbit, when we're in our grab bag of extra stories here.
Anybody sad that Bill Paxton has passed? Because this, as Twister 2, would have been a great start.
I'm just waiting
the
for
car .3.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say game over, man. Game over.
Right. So I'm also just waiting for cow.
Yeah.
Another cow. Actually, I think that was the first one.
Yeah, exactly. And other very relevant news to the people in this room, Coca-Cola is changing the flavor of a soda again. The company promised an even more iconic Coke taste for its new version of Coke Zero. And I know a lot of Coke Zero has been consumed between the three of us over the last decade or more. But some anxious consumers remember the new Coke debacle of 1985. Will, are you concerned about Coca-Cola fiddling with the formula of your beloved Coke Zero?
I got more annoyed when they changed it from Coke Zero to Coke Zero Sugar because people couldn't figure out the nuance of what zero and zero sugar meant. That to me lost more faith in humanity than people being upset about the flavor of Coke. I prefer that it stayed the way it is. Well, we'll see what the jury's out on this. I mean, they're just trying to do something new. It seems like they keep on messing with Coke Zero. Is it not performing properly? Is it just not taking off? Is it not?
It's way more popular than Coke is around everywhere that I hang around with. Nobody wants a Coke Classic anymore. They just want Coke Zero.
Me too. So why do they keep on changing the name and the formula and the look? Like, why are they messing with it?
Well, the cynics out there would say that the original tweaking of the Coke formula back in 1985 with the introduction of New Coke was simply a play to eventually double the shelf space for Coke, because there was a while, as you may recall, after responding to the popular outcry that they brought back the original Coke or something close to it in the form of Coke Classic. Then all of a sudden on the store shelves, you had the New Coke and you had Coke Classic. Now, is this the gambit here? Are we going to have Coke Zero Sugar and Coke Zero Sugar Classic for all the diehards?
Yes.
I just want to be able to get Coke Zero Sugar Cherry in a regular basis here in Canada. Yes. I can find it in bottles. I can't find it in cans anywhere. Just clap your hands. Just clap your hands. Here's the thing. I'll try it. I'll end up burning something down if it's terrible. Probably my expectations. But
I'm waiting for Coke Zero Sugar Cherry Pro Max Home Edition.
Can I say I don't like the red and the black in this combination on the can. The black and the red is good.
I think they're also trying to make it look more like traditional Coke.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. And I'm with you. I don't like the branding or the name or that bothers me more than changing the formula until I actually taste it. I'm going to hold out my final decision until I taste it. But
final conspiracy theory. They're actually looking to get this to taste as much like original Coke as possible so they can avoid the sugary soda taxes that are being put on in so many places. And this actually is the end of Coke Classic.
Ooh. Hell no. So,
or as you like to call it, high test.
Exactly. Well, now back to the issue of the rebranding from Coke Zero to Coke Zero Sugar. Will, I get your annoyance at that, but I think there's a legitimate reason, because more than one person that I've spoken to over the years assumed the Coke Zero had no caffeine in it either. And they thought Zero was like zeroing out everything. No sugar, no caffeine, also no flavor. So, but then they rebranded it to Zero Sugar just to make that crystal clear, even though it's not as elegant, because Pepsi did the same thing.
Well, the other thing I'll say too about that, and I hear what you're saying for sure, is that it amazed me a few years ago when there was that lawsuit. I think it was against 7-Eleven with the big gulps. Is the lack of education, and they poor 7-Eleven actually and Coke had to come out with commercials which are, if you eat more calories than you burn off in a day, you will gain weight. And where's the failure in the public education system if people have to be told that by Coca-Cola? I mean, this is the thing. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think that they would have to be accountable for that, and that's part of, as Gray says, fueling. I think some of this is. I've actually had several people ask me how come I didn't gain weight by drinking so much Diet Coke, and I was like, because it has no sugar in it. And I've had more than one person say, that's not possible. It has calories though, right? No, that's actually the whole point of it.
It just has chemicals, even more.
Yeah, delicious chemicals.
Yeah, I've had at least 3 people say that to me. It's been over a decade, but it's just crazy how much people don't sort of understand this. So I think part of my frustration with it, and you say the zero is confusing, what does the zero refer to, is people have so little product knowledge or understanding about calories, apparently, in my experience, that people didn't kind of understand that, or confused about what the zero meant, and that they had to be clear, especially after those lawsuits, that it was zero sugar, and that they couldn't just have this sort of slick branding of zero.
Well, if our public education system is failing us, why would we trust governments to, with these sugary drink taxes, especially given when you dig deeper into the research, a lot of sugar-free drinks that contain sweeteners such as aspartame and the like actually trick the bodies of many people out there, not everyone, but many, into thinking that it's actually sugar. There's the sweetness. You see some of the heaviest people you see in shopping in grocery stores have carts full of not necessarily sugary sodas, which sometimes they are, but even diet sodas. And again, every body is different, but aspartame and other sweeteners actually wreak havoc on people's systems, especially when, consumed in gross quantities. I mean, I know that you've had a lot over the years, Will, and maybe you won the genetic lottery there, with the ability to process aspartame. But there's the findings are like for lots and lots of people who were drinking, all this diet soda to try and lose weight, it was actually working against them in the long run. So there's, again, with everything, it's complicated and there's nuance to these things. And just to put these blanket taxes just because a drink's got sugar versus not might be a little misguided. But I like Graham's theory that could be part of the play here. But
yeah,
they will pry my Coke Classic from my cold dead hands.
Okay, Mr. Heston.
Well, moderation and everything, right? I drink way less soda than I used to, and I'm okay with that. But then it's even more special, especially after mowing the lawn on a hot day, and you crack a nice cold Coke with actual sugar in it. Because I just burned a ton of calories. Damn it, I deserve it.
I'm not getting in between you and your Coke. That's straight
rant
up.
over.
Hard
Rant over.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another great episode. We've got lots more, many more stories, some of which we'll have to tackle next week. But I just wanted to give a shout out to our compatriot Tasia Custodi, who was supposed to be with us this week. Her great return, but alas, got waylaid by a client emergency. So she didn't appear to have a new YouTube video this week, but a new episode of her podcast called Talk Techie to Me. Episode 4, AI 101, What is Artificial Intelligence? So again, what Tasia manages to do in just with her videos and podcasts in 10 or 20 minutes, it takes us an hour or more to talk about it on our show. So go and check out Tasia's podcast at tasiacustodi.com, and you can navigate the links to find her a podcast, or you can go to your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. If you want to find out more about us here at Momentous, you can visit us at momentous.tv, twitter.com/momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, and instagram.com/momentous.tv. Search for my name on YouTube and then look for the Momentous playlist until we finally get our vanity URL, but we'll get there eventually. Just all of you out there, just play an episode, let it play through, even if it's in the background. We got to get those viewing hours in, those views. So that includes you two. We should all get your parents, all your entire family, your friends, your enemies.
I'm sure my mother's watching right now. Hi, Mom.
Hey, Mom. Will Silver, Gray Williams, thank you one again. Favorite day of the week. We'll see you all next week on Momentous Live. And